Hello. Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Doing well.
Good.
How are you?
Good. Thank you. Welcome to Kristen Campbell Hill and Hugo Grayling. Thank you guys for being here on the podcast today, um, Mothers versus World, where we are having different speakers from really internationally, from different backgrounds, different parenting approaches, different lifestyles, occupations, to talk about just differences in how we're raising kids and how maybe we're really very similar as well. So, thank you again for being here. And so today we're going to talk about the perspectives of raising kids in same sex marriages or same sex households. So let's just jump in. And Kristen, I know you have a bit of a unique perspective on this, some different angles. So if you wouldn't mind just opening up and telling us about that.
Yeah. So I have two children. My oldest is about to be 21 and he is a junior in college. And then I have a daughter who is 5. She's actually going to be 6 in about a week. So I think that what gives me a unique perspective is that when I had my son, I was very young and I married his father. And we were married for a very short amount of time and realized that it wasn't working and we divorced. And I have not dated a man since. I am very happily married now to my amazing, awesome wife, and we have our daughter. So I think where my perspective is unique is having the time and opportunity to raise a child in a heterosexual environment and then later bringing a child into a household with 2 moms. I've seen the beauty of the diversity and also the challenge of that diversity and qualifying the people around us to make sure that they bring good things into our lives and don't disrupt my child's innocence of how perfect her family is and things like that. So.
Interesting. Yeah, great. And Hugo, is your story a little bit different, I'm guessing?
Yes, I didn't quite start like that. I just jumped right into the gay. Um, I never actually thought I'd be a father. Growing up, that wasn't something that I saw or experienced. And so then I met Joel and we decided to pursue this. Um, and it worked. And we got a beautiful baby boy who's now 7 and doing well.
So I guess from that, when you, like you mentioned, you really hadn't planned on it from the beginning. How did you get to, when you decided to have a child, did you go through the different options of fostering or adoption or surrogacy, or how did that work out? How did you come to the decision?
We looked into adoption and we got new neighbors that bought the house because they were in the process of adopting and they were very excited. And the day the child was born, the birth mom changed her mind and sent her a text message. And she was absolutely crushed. And at that moment, I knew that's not something I would emotionally survive. And so that swayed us a little bit towards surrogacy. And that's the route we took. It was daunting and intimidating and expensive and all the things, but I do believe that that was the right choice for us. Like, everything worked the first time, and it just worked. So yes, we looked at all the options, but surrogacy was what we ended up choosing.
And Chris,
So,
how about with
sorry.
you? Yeah, no, that's okay.
So,
I'm interested.
I didn't even think to mention that part. So Rose, that's our daughter's name. She was conceived through IVF. And something that we did that was unique, but I think I'm seeing it more commonly now, is I carried her, but it was actually my wife's egg. It's a pretty awesome way for us to both really share the experience with each other. We use the my oven, her bun analogy, that kind of thing. And now actually Rose is getting older, and I'm sure that Landon's going through this too. She's starting to want to understand the biology of how we exist. And so she's asked me like, well, Mom, how did I get inside of you? And so I feel like actually for us, and Hugo, probably the same for you, it's been the simplest answer because I can just say the doctor put you in there and it's completely accurate.
Right. There's no bees.
Yeah.
There's no birds. We can
Yep.
literally say the doctor.
No big conversation. No, just very simple. Well, the doctor did that. And she's like, yeah, checks out. So,
You say that. I actually had a kid in Landon's class ask me how it worked.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, you should probably talk to your mom about that. So, yeah, I mean, kids ask questions, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, we have our gestational carrier in our life.
Yeah.
Landon knows who she is. And so when he asks questions, I just say, Miss Jen, let us borrow her belly. And, and that's how we got to have you. So, yes, it's actually a little bit easier, I think, in that regard, because we don't have to get into the details of the birds and the bees.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like
and to know that it's, they're asking questions. I mean, your kids are like around first grade, that level. So,
Yeah, Landon's a rising second grader. So, the questions are definitely there. There's curiosities.
Yeah. Something I feel like I would hope that maybe when your viewers are watching this, that they take note too. I mean, listen to both of our stories. We've had to jump through great hoops to become parents. And so, there's a lot of controversy around our families and what is acceptable in America, what is not. But I think it's pretty extraordinary. I mean, we have children that are more expensive than cars, right? There was no accident here. This was a lot of love and hope and planning. Rose was actually our 5th IVF transfer. I mean, it took a lot of dedication to make that baby.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing. Like, Landon was blowing a dried wishing flower, whatever they're called, one day, and I was like, what did you wish for? And he's like, I can't tell you. And I'm like, if it comes true, can you tell? And he's like, I think so. And I was like, guess what I wished for? And he was like, did it come true? And I'm like, it did. I wished for you. And so that was like, it stuck, right? And so now he knows that he can tell, if it comes true, he can tell what he wished for. And that's one thing that I can absolutely assure him of forever, is that he was absolutely, truly wanted. And we jumped through all the hoops we had to jump through to have him. He wasn't an accident. He wasn't oh God. We truly wanted him enough that we jumped through all those hoops. And so that I find comforting, that I can assure him to that level how much he was wanted and how much he means to us.
Yeah, that is heartwarming. Both of you. I mean, that's wonderful. It's so warming to hear that. Kristen, I'm interested in your son, because he's older, young adult. And so how is that whole transition for him in terms of, seeing you with the different lifestyles, and then now having a sister who is much younger, actually, which is interesting, much younger, and then from 2 moms? Or tell me more about that.
So, as far as him and the transition of the lifestyle, I mean, one thing I can say is we've always had just a really loving, open life. So before I ever even started dating women, he had plenty of gay men and lesbian women in his life. So it wasn't a new concept for him. He already was raised with that love and acceptance. And he was very young. So I started dating women when he was 4. So for him, it's kind of more of what he remembers than anything else. As he got older in school, I will say, especially for a young man with 2 moms, I think that maybe there was times that, like, he might have been the butt of like, not a joke meant in a negative way, but in a young men's club of like, hey, Evan's moms. Yeah. So I think that was a reality of his life a little bit. But something that he's expressed to me before is that I think that it helped him also connect with peers on many levels. Another thing about Evan is that he's biracial. So, he's this mixed kid with two moms, but he has a dad, and his dad is also remarried, and he's got siblings from there. So I think for him, it really worked out too. And Hugo actually knows my son. He's a pretty exceptional adult man. As far as having a younger sibling, I mean, he was 15 when she was born. So he was just as stoked, right? Like I have this adorable video of when I found out the gender, and I did like just a small gender like surprise for him and Jamie, my wife, at home. And like, he was the one that was like the most enthusiastic about it being a girl. And, it's been pretty great. I actually highly recommend such a large age difference between your children.
Babysitter first off.
Yeah, right. Come out of the gates with a babysitter. That's always convenient. And then, just watching your kid fall in love with your kid, and at that age where they have that capacity to mentally and emotionally grow, it's pretty incredible. And so also, just simple things. There's no jealousy. He was very well into a different stage of life when this baby came along. And we're in the college years now. So luckily I've got like a 15-year gap before I have to re-enter that expense. So that's nice. But yeah, no, it's gone really well. He's happy. And Rose, it's been a little confusing for Rose. That's something I will say, as she's getting older. And now, and I hope I'm not topic hopping, but as she's getting older and seeing different families through being in school, she's heading into first grade. She had kindergarten. It's left a lot of confusion because he is so big, right? She knows that he is her brother, but there's been a couple times she's like, but is he my dad? And I'm like, no. And she's like, but he's big like the dads, and he's a boy. So I get where her mind's at with it. And, we talk about it often, but then she still circles back to it. So there's still gears churning. I mean, I think just a week ago, she was like, so Evan is your brother. And I was like, no, Evan is my son. And she was like, but he's my brother. Like, she's still kind of wrestling. And I don't think, I would suspect that this is not such a challenging concept in a traditional family, right? I don't know that, because they don't have anything different that they're comparing to, if that makes sense.
You say that. I think Landon struggles with understanding brothers. Like, because he doesn't have a brother.
Right.
And so, but I do. And so me trying to explain that it's my brother, but it's your uncle, he struggles with that. Like, he doesn't get it. And also a friend of mine has a son that's in high school. And he's like, is Kaya grown up?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, he's just an older kid. And he's like, but he drives. And so it's like, you can tell like things are churning, but it's just not quite connected yet. But
I think that we should take it as compliments. It means that our children think that we all also look like teenagers.
There you go.
Right. I like that.
Not the other way around.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you don't know if it's more because of an age difference versus your marriage versus history. Yeah, it's kind of
right.
Whole melting pot together.
Well, most of their siblings would have kids in school,
right?
The same school, and so when just confusing.
So how about, I think Kristen, you had mentioned briefly in a conversation that we had about just some things that maybe are different social interactions with others, or things that have come up specifically being in a same-sex marriage that you didn't. And I know your previous marriage wasn't as long with Evan, so he wasn't as old. There's not as many opportunities, but would you share some of those
Yeah.
things that maybe from that I wouldn't even recognize or be aware of?
I think the biggest difference that I've come across is having to qualify who comes into Rose's life, right? So, the typical interaction with your kids, they go to school, they make friends, and then you love that friend and you make a play date with that friend's parents. And, it's a pretty natural progression. I think, I know it was with my son, but what I have realized is now, because we live a life that maybe some people are not comfortable with, we have to actually qualify those families. We have to essentially make sure that they're not going to add to, and in my case right now with Rose being only 5, and disrupt her innocence, right? She doesn't even realize that there is people that don't see our family the way as they see their own. I mean, she's just oblivious to that. So I have to be really conscious now of who we bring into her life. And with Evan, that was just, it wasn't even a scope, right? It was like, hey, your kid likes my kid. Do they want to come over after school? Done. But specifically with Evan, and that's one of the things that really drove that lesson home, is he had this one friend from early elementary school. And I told you that his father and I divorced when he was very young. But what I didn't realize is that because I wasn't in a active partnership, I was just dating and things like that. This boy's mother had no idea that I was gay. She just thought I was another single mom. And so for years, this kid grew a relationship with my son. He would tell other people I was like his other mother. He's a very, very sweet boy. And then almost immediately after I got married, all of a sudden he stopped being able to come around. And at this point, the boys were in like 8th grade. I mean, many years had gone by. And I just didn't understand what was going on. And I finally found out that all of that time, his mother, who is a very kind woman, she's just deeply, deeply Southern religious, didn't feel comfortable with her son being around our home. So that's just it's a huge thing. I don't think I don't, it's not even that I don't think, I know that traditional parents, this is not something that goes through your mind. Like I said, there's a natural progression to how your children develop relationships through school and stuff. But now from here on out, anybody, I mean, it just happened. I'm, room mom. It just happened not so long ago at a kid's birthday party. This mom was like, I'd love for our kids to get together. And then she mentioned, where she was from. And I'm aware that that area has a pretty strong, we are in a very diverse area. And so I know culturally where she's from is very against homosexuality. So I felt like I needed to make it clear to her before she shows up at my house to play one day that I don't have a husband at home. And that's awkward. It's an awkward thing to kind of sprinkle in there. And then my wife's name is Jamie. So then I have to find a way to even, it's not like her name is Christy. I have to find an extra way to make sure that they understand Jamie is a female name.
Yeah, my wife and I would love to have her come over, or I go through the same thing. And you can't always judge that particular book by its cover. And
Right.
So you almost have to just tell everybody to avoid that potential, and that was my thing. I don't want Landon to pay the price for people's intolerance towards us. Exactly. And that's a hard tightrope to walk, because you don't always know. People are very good at hiding those types of prejudices and intolerance, and it's all rooted in either fear or religion, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's interesting, because then I'm guessing you either, like Hugo, you said you feel kind of maybe obligated from the beginning to put it out there, but then at the same time, I'm guessing someone might think, well, why are you telling me about that piece? Like,
right. Well, and then at that point you can say, because some people just don't, But luckily for me, like, if you think I'm married to a woman, like, shame on you. Like, I'm sort of like a walking, like, yeah, probably not. So that usually tells the story, but I do feel obligated to let people know before it becomes awkward in the moment. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had people slowly, you know, evaporate because of
Mm-hmm.
it. And I'd rather that and deal with Landon's disappointment that that kid is no longer around than deal with having the talk about, you know, later on why they couldn't say why, his dad took him away or
Yeah,
whatever. So it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
absolutely. I mean, it's heart-wrenching when that happened with my son. I mean, talk about like some parent guilt right there, right? Like, I mean, I
Right. He's
love my
looking at
life.
you and you're like, my friend
Right.
is because of you, and
Right.
yeah, that's
He
oh,
never, and so, and that would even be a flip side of it. He actually kept it a secret from me. It wasn't until a good year later, when it was completely a closed topic, that he admitted to me the real reasons. Like,
that
at
doesn't
first I
surprise
was like
me.
berating him, like, why is this kid not coming over anymore? Where is he? What's going on? I thought they had like a falling out. And then finally, as he got older, he was like, actually, he wasn't allowed to come over anymore. And talk about a stab in the heart, knowing that, I mean, whether it's fair or not fair, or just or not just, anything that a parent does that affects their child's happiness in a negative way is heart-wrenching. And then to
Absolutely.
take it on top of the fact that through that, his goal was to look out for me, and he kept it to himself.
That does not surprise me at all. Like,
Yeah, and
that tracks. That just
Yeah.
tracks.
and we all know what that feels like of, it doesn't matter, regardless of the marriage situation, like anything that hurts your child or,
Right.
hurts their feelings. It's just like, oh, it's like a
Yeah.
dagger to the heart.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is a tough one. And so do you have like your speech, or is there an age where like, or is it just like a natural kind of thing that you guys talk about of how to integrate all this stuff in and some of these things that are going to happen? Or do you wait until that happens? What
I
any
think we operate optimistically, right? Like, um, I feel like, and this, I think there's irony maybe in this saying this, because right now specifically, we're in this crazy political climate of what's going on, what's happening, right? Um, I tend to be a sunny side person, right? Like, I see, and I've already seen so much progression, and Rose is so completely oblivious to the negative things that are out there. I really, I guess, think that it's going to stay that way until she is mature enough to understand the truth. I mean, at this point, my entire goal is just to preserve. So I'm not even thinking about how to deal with it. I'm really focused on preserving what is presently there, if that makes sense.
Right. It's hard though, right? Because you see the writing on the wall. Like, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I do agree we're in a very, very diverse area, and I feel like there's a little bit of safety in that. Um, but it's definitely hard to stay optimistic all the time with them, knowing, seeing all this stuff, because it's changed a lot since Landon was born to now. It's
Yeah.
definitely changed a lot. So
positively or negatively?
politically, negatively.
So, I mean, yeah, Kristen, I like how, yeah, you said you're optimistic, and right now she's oblivious, which makes my heart happy too. That innocence that you talked about earlier too. You're trying to keep that innocence as long as possible and kind of shield her as long as possible. I'm
Mm-hmm.
guessing too, from sometimes the harsh reality that's going to happen. It's
Right.
inevitable, but hopefully she'll be, at an age or at a cognitive level, and I'm sure you will have equipped her well when that happens too. Yeah.
I think sometimes, so, and I don't know if I've already mentioned this earlier in the podcast, but we lived in Tennessee. So, that's the Bible Belt. That is the buckle of the Bible Belt. It's not even just, it is like the thing that's holding it together. And then moved to Northern Virginia. So I think sometimes that maybe even that, like, it's just been such a positive change that maybe that leads to my optimism. While things have changed drastically in the last few years since our children were born, I mean, shortly before we had Rose, everybody was like pro us. We got to get married. Life was changing. And then it seemed like shortly afterward, a lot of hatred started, showing its head. So I'm rambling. A lot has changed. However, the climate here in Northern Virginia versus when we lived in Tennessee is such a drastic and more welcoming change. I feel like that helps the bubble, if that makes sense. But in Tennessee, it would be a very different story. In Tennessee, what we experienced is kindergartners that have already been taught not to have that innocence. And at that point, that would have been the greater concern. How do you shield a 5-year-old from 5-year-olds? I don't feel like that's something that I have to worry about here right now.
Correct. That's one thing I feel very comfortable and optimistic about our schools. And so I really do love that about this area.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing actually Evan has verbalized to me is that when he got older, while for the most part, it was kind of like a, hey, bro, you got to like maybe he leveraged it in a cool way with some groups. He also had plenty of very religiously raised friends that actually like told him about how his mom was damned and things of that nature, for sure. And that's a much more common conversation in Tennessee amongst even young people.
That I find very scary too.
Mm-hmm.
I see when I was volunteering in Lyman's class doing a thing, and one of the kids' moms was wearing a Jesus shirt, and it's like it's sad that that's equated with intolerance,
Mm-hmm.
And so I immediately kind of put that kid in a box of, maybe keep our distance, because of that. And so that's
and like you said, and it's unfortunate that we go there too at the same time.
Absolutely.
But it's based on, well, your experiences too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, and I have to imagine, we think about this globally. I think everybody everywhere is probably experiencing something similar at some level. Do you think?
I do. I mean, there are countries where homosexuality is flat out illegal.
Right.
And so as much as, we've struggled to get to where we are, I think we're still lucky that we have what we have and we can live the life we live.
And I'm wondering if how about other family pressures, and doesn't have to be necessarily about same-sex marriage, but just it could be about that, or just pressures of raising children. Did you guys get input from others, whether it was wanted or unwanted? I'm sure it was all in loving intent, with loving intentions.
Yes.
Tell me about that, just even in terms of raising kids with parent pressures. And then we'll maybe jump into maybe more recently with social media influence.
Gotcha. I think people just offer advice, period. And I think as long as similar with the questions, people ask a lot of inappropriate questions, and people don't necessarily always know what is appropriate with same-sex parents, right? They may not have ever encountered a family like ours. And so I've been very open to the questions and similar to the advice, as long as I feel like it's coming from a place of care and not a place of what's the word I'm looking for? A superiority, maybe? Like, I'm open to it. Like, I'll tolerate it. I'll answer your questions truthfully. And, look, for me, it's a way to educate. And, you've never encountered a family like ours. Let me tell you about it. We're not that scary, because I think people are afraid of things they don't understand. And if they don't understand my family, they're going to be afraid of it, and they're going to try to avoid it. And so I've been very open to all of it. And yes, there's all kinds of questions and all kinds of unsolicited advice all the time. I don't know if it's different for you, Christy, but like, I think people feel like because we're two guys, like, we need a mother's perspective.
Right.
We need, so.
So, I mean, well, there's a couple things. For me, I don't think anybody was giving me parent advice. I had been at it for a minute. So, at least when we had Rose, right? I had the 15-year-old. But in regards to our families, we both are at very different ends of the spectrum of family. So my wife actually was raised very Southern religious, actually, Church of the Nazarene, like as religious as it gets. And then I was not. And so I feel like for me, on some level, I've had it really lucky, right? I think that when I told my parents, hey, I'm gay, I think my mom was like, yay, I've got something new to talk to my friends about. Like, it was great news to her. My dad was like, yay, I love daughters. We're going to get more of them. For her family, it was really hard. And, we've been married. We're about to hit our 10 years, and she has an incredible family. Their unity and their value of just family. It's something I've never experienced. It's beautiful, but there is some very blaring different. They're, incredibly religious. So she went through a much more challenging time than I did. And at the point that we decided to have a child, I don't know that they were jazzed. I think they were polite. And now Rose is here, and I think they're in love, right? I that's what it boils down to. There are still even differences, though, in how I've seen them grandparent our child versus their other grandchildren. It's subtle enough that our daughter doesn't realize it, and hopefully she never will. One thing is that they're more, gosh, I hope this doesn't go super viral while I'm like saying, but one thing, again, I want to preface my father-in-law, especially, I'm deeply in love with them. They're wonderful people, but they have a solid foundation of their belief system, and I respect it and I understand it. But as a result, they've never watched our daughter. And I think that ultimately, when grandparents watch the grandkid, it's for what? It's so that mom and mom, dad and dad, so that they can get a moment away from parenting. And so I suspect, and this has never been stated, but I suspect that the roadblock is that by eliminating Rose and taking her maybe for a weekend, that also opens the door to our glorious gayness, right? So
They become complicit in your sin.
Right.
Yeah.
And that sounds so dirty, they have changed dramatically. Like, as time has gone by, the amount of love that they have given us and the way they have entered our lives from when we first started dating, it's nothing short of like just a really beautiful story. And I empathize. I am a parent. And for them, I use the example of, this would be like if my son decided, he wanted to be a crack addict. I know that sounds like a horrible parallel, but it is that intense for them, that our lives are something that have damned us. What do you do when you think your child is damning themselves? Regardless of whether we agree with them, that is a pain that they're living through. And I completely empathize for them in that area, But anyways, that's a lot of extra detail. But as far as the difference of parenting, I've seen it on both ends. I saw my parents, my grandfather, we found out that we were finally pregnant. I told you it took 5 tries the day before Thanksgiving. And so we just happened to be visiting my grandparents at that time. And we're all holding hands in a circle, talking about what we're grateful for. And my 80-year-old grandfather is teared up that he's grateful to find out that my wife and I are having a baby. It was beautiful. My other parents, my in-laws, also teared up, but I don't know that it was in a joyous moment. You know, it was a learning curve. Now, again, they're awesome. They are the most active, energetic, and loving grandparents there are. There's just some very clear differences in how they do their grandparenting with our family versus their others.
You know, stepping up despite the discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where it's at. Like I have some grandparents in Landon's life that choose not to have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
And he's oblivious. He could not care less.
Right.
For me, it stings a little bit.
Yeah.
You know? So showing up despite their own discomfort.
Yes.
That's commendable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I hope, again, if this ever went viral, I hope that's the message that they see. They're incredible people and they've totally done great in our lives. But it is different.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that's such a, you know, a beautiful way you put it, in that, you know, our purpose today isn't to say right, wrong, change anyone's opinion about sexuality. But I think what you've described so nicely and painted such a beautiful picture of love, really. I mean, it's, and you know, they love Rose, that your in-laws love her. It's just, you know, they have, for their own reasons, they have difficulty, you know, loving the same way, I guess, maybe. But I don't know. I'm kind of speechless at the moment, because it was so touching. And, you know, you feel, I feel for both sides.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Both groups of individuals, because you know that I'm sure, and I have not met Rose, but I'm sure she is very darling, and
she's a force.
She is.
They love her, you know, just the same, but there's just something that's holding them back a little bit. But hopefully that, you know, maybe that won't always be the same either, because you're doing such a great job of accepting them as well.
And they are, I mean, like right down to like every few days they FaceTime with her. I mean, we live states away from each other. They're deep Florida, but I mean, they're incredibly active grandparents. They've just had to navigate uncomfortable waters.
Yeah.
But they chose to.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
I'll tell you what really sunk them, though. I'll tell y'all. So when they first met me, I mean, it wasn't exactly like a parade of excitement like now. You know, Jamie just really didn't bring people around. But at the point that we were engaged, she was like, I guess this one I better bring around. And it wasn't like an exciting moment. I will always remember that first meeting and how uncomfortable it was. And I think I'm charming, but I don't think they were that charmed by me right away. What really sunk them was Evan. So Evan will officially have been their first grandchild. Even now, you know, all of the family pictures, we have all of these children. The oldest is 6. We've got 6 down to 3, and there's 4 of them. And then the man child, Evan, who has to hold the babies in every grandchild picture, you know. But that's how kind and open they were. I mean, even with their discomfort, what they really fell in love with before any of this happened was becoming grandparents to Evan. Like they're great people, and they've really made strides to make us feel part of their lives and to show us that we're loved, even though it's hard at times. So.
Yeah.
And so, Hugo, anything about some of those specific differences in parenting or things?
Oldest here. Hang on, let me just pick one.
Or anything funny that you want to?
So one of the things I think that people don't always realize is, because we had to use an egg donor, half the equation is unknown, right? So Landon's special needs. And so we don't know, you know, we didn't know that was coming or had to look for, or half the equation is unknown because we don't know the egg donor.
Mm-hmm.
right? We don't know her history. We don't know anything about her. So it's just the uncertainty and the unknown of 50% of his genetic makeup is unknown to us. And so you're navigating stuff that you didn't anticipate navigating.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
And you don't have anybody to blame. You don't know who to blame.
Right.
just blame the egg donor. Everything is the egg donor's fault.
Everything.
Another thing is changing tables in men's rooms do not exist. So
Yeah.
I have changed, like, our diaper bag came with like a changing pad. I've done it on the floor of the men's room before because there's no other options.
Yeah.
Like, and so then I got to the point where I was so annoyed with it. I would, if we're in a restaurant and there's not one, I would ask the manager to go clear out the ladies' room. And I would just go change them in the ladies' room because that's where the changing table was. So that's one thing that was just annoying that I hope to see change over time. Because dads go, even in traditional marriages, dads go out with the babies all the time too. And, we should not have to go out to the car and change them in the trunk of your SUV because there's, nowhere to change them. So
I think that's another, these family bathrooms that are popping up everywhere. That is the solution. That is the solution to so many things that everybody is talking about right now. But
yes, even, the trans bathroom debate,
right.
like just having single stall bathrooms, period. That's where
it has made a big difference. It's something even Evan has faced, right? He took Rose to the mall once and he was like, what do I do? He called me. He had some disagreeing Taco Bell. Another thing I probably shouldn't said in case this gets big, but he had some disagreeing Taco Bell and he's like, Mom, what do I do? And I was like, somewhere in that mall is a bathroom that will let you and Rose be together alone in a stall,
to a store and,
figure,
you have a kid, like they'll probably take you in the back and so first off, Taco Bell sponsor this podcast. And that's, I think, family restrooms is because I've seen dads carry their daughters to the stalls in a men's room past the line of urinals, because the kid's too young to go into the ladies' room by herself. And what do you do? We had a situation where one of the people in our community complained on the Facebook forum because a man came into the locker room, the women's locker room, with his daughter. And upon further investigation, it turns out he announced himself. She was crying. He announced himself and then entered. And then, again, we live in such an amazing area. The comments on it, because the original post was kind of like, there was a man in the locker room, or, and all the comments were like, but it was okay. Like, the kid needed help. He announced himself. He did all the right things. Like, and that stuff like that is where I feel hopeful that the current ugliness will make way for a better, kinder, nicer future.
Yeah.
So I said I had a whole list. I had two, and then the other thing we already talked about, the social minefields of having same-sex parents. So
anything you want to talk about before we wrap up about social media? Could be just about parenting, or do you like it? Do you hate it? Has it been helpful in any way, or what do you think?
Golly, that's a whole
podcast.
That is a whole, I mean, does it need to just be about parenting? I have 1,000 thoughts of social media in our community.
We'll be here for hours.
We also went through a teenage phase with social media, and and I feel like that was just a prepping course because I feel like girls are so mean. So when Rose gets there, it's going to be a whole new thing.
It completely, I don't want to say it terrifies me, right? But I mean, this isn't specific to even our unique families, but that just the whole, I have a 20-year-old and a 5-year-old, that drastic change in these last 15 years. When Evan was little, when he was a baby, if I had a concern to look up, I had to go to my dial-up computer and wait to Google now it's made me crazy, right? Now, any small thing I can just be like, and decide that I should worry and freak out over it. So that's changed. And then, even as an adult woman, I see, I'm on Facebook. We're in our 40s. And we're the Facebook generation, right? And I see, I look at these other people and I'm like, how does so and so from high school still look so good? Or, I notice when this other person is interacting with this other friend of ours so much more than me, and I hate that. Right? That is a petty ass thing to admit. Sorry, I said
Right.
petty.
Or on Venmo,
Right.
like, why
Oh,
did
Jamie just mentioned that.
Yeah, it's like, do we need to advertise when you pay somebody back for tacos? Because now I'm like, how do you know that person? I have questions.
Right.
Like,
I know that you pay for your haircuts a lot. Hugo.
I make mine private, and Joel's just like,
Oh, is it
haircut.
Joel's? I don't know. One of you shows up in my feed all the time is paying for haircuts.
Make that private. Or like Joel charged whoever for a cell phone, whatever. And it's like private.
But as far as for parenting, I'm scared. Evan, he was on the later end of this becoming more common with younger people, right? When he was later into middle school and high school, that's really when it was a Snapchat thing. That they weren't the ones that got on Facebook. It was to play the games on Facebook. There wasn't a lot of that. But now between Instagram and I just can't imagine if I, at 42 years old, know the insecurities that it can stir up in me. What is my daughter going to face? I know how insecure I was as a middle school girl without those extras. So what is it going to, and so I want to guard her from it, but then you're left with the secondary question of how long do you guard before now you're actually making them the weirdo by not allowing them to have the same things that their friends are. It's a really tight line to walk, and I'm scared for it. I'm genuinely, I even think about like the mental health of young kids, and it worries me.
Yeah. One thing about that is and I have been here, at least there's more research coming out about these kinds of things specifically, and hopefully like some sound guidance to answer some of those questions too about what it's doing to the brain. And and the thing that I think about, worry about too, was social media. And one of the things that through at Vera Care that we're trying to address or tackle or help is to be able to provide some sound information for parenting, that so people, because when you go to social media, you just don't know where the information is coming from, the background of the people. Is it sound? Should I try it? There's all kinds of conflicting stuff, and
I feel like most misinformation spread via social media.
Yeah.
Somebody I know and I thought was smart just shared an article about how Band-Aids cause cancer.
And when you're a parent, and I don't think it matters if you're a first time, second time, whatever, but especially a first time parent, it's just having a child is overwhelming. Let's just face it. Those first, no matter how you prepared you think you are,
no book can prepare you for the world. Like
it is overwhelming. And then everybody wants to give you information, family and everyone else that you're having to sort through. But then on top of that, then in like situations where you're in a pickle, where you need some sound information to make decisions and therapies, or is there a problem? Is there not a problem? Is there a feeding issue? Or is this just some picky eating? Things like that. That's where I find, I'm a little bit fearful of social media. So, just.
I had a parent just recently tell me a story of, and I have yet to see this, but I guess with AI now, they're even like duplicating like news reporters that are truly news reporters that you see, but it's a completely fake story, and it looks like this legitimate person with the legitimate background is telling this story. And I know a ton of adults that don't take the time to fact check something like that. What do we think our young early users are going to? I mean, just the level of misinformation that can be spread and the toxicity that can cause. It's
100%. So apparently, someone is listening and just texted me and said he will mark it as private moving forward.
Well, but how will I know about haircuts?
Right, you won't know. You'll just have to come look. See a fresh cut.
Well, I so appreciate you guys being here. I want to wrap up just kind of by saying, well, one, I appreciate your honesty and all of your experiences that you've shared with parenting. And I really feel like as I'm just sitting here taking it all in and listening to your different perspectives and histories, that we talked about significant differences from same-sex households to traditional households, but really in the end, we all love our children. We want the best for our children. We're trying to shield them the best we can, whether it's issues from whose parents are at home, the sex of the parents at home versus just, kids being bullied in the classroom, or, we all want the same. And even from social media and AI, I know everyone in the world is dealing with the same stuff. It's not just here in the United States. It's not here in Leesburg, Virginia, Ashburn, Virginia, the South. So I'm hoping our conversation, it resonates with people in different areas. And but I guess we're all human. I don't know what to say. I'm just getting sad.
I think that's something the whole world has in common is we want what's best for our kids.
Yeah. And I think we have to, work together and
lift each other up.
Yeah. And be together to solve these problems, because like you said, Hugo, there's no book. There's no way to be 100%.
Despite whether it's a gay household or, whatever, regardless of the anatomy of the family, it would be great if we can all lift each other up.
Yeah, absolutely. Compassion, right? I think parenting is just such a tough game, right? I know I've screwed it up a bunch. I don't know anybody who hasn't. And if we could all just come together with that kind of compassion, right? The same compassion that we just talked about earlier in this, where I told you about my in-laws, but I absolutely understand like the parental struggle that they must feel. If we could just think more empathetically towards everyone. Again, I'm a sunny person, but I think that that's the main lesson here, right? When it comes to parenting, no matter what your family looks like, if we're doing it right, we all have the same objective: raising healthy young adults that surpass what we ever could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Raising happy, kind humans.
Kids are resilient, thank goodness, because I've messed up a bunch too. And I think my kids are still pretty well adjusted and doing okay. But yeah, we all mess up, but we all have the love and the great intention, and like you said, the compassion and everything. So
yeah, I think that's key, compassion.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again for being here, and maybe we can come back around and chat some more about social media.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelly.
Take care.
Bye, Hugo.
Bye.